All right. Hey, Alysa.
Hello.
And who's this? We got JSD with us, Jon Suarez-Davis. Some people call him the CMO whisperer.
Hello,
Thanks
hello,
for
hello.
joining.
Yes, it is
Hey, so
JSD, right? And not Juan Sanchez Davis. I've been introduced as Juan Sanchez Davis.
that's your alter ego. We won't talk about
That's
that.
my alter ego.
Hey, we were just jamming here talking CDPs and privacy and how those things intersect, and we thought, you know what, just hit record. And so JSD, to you first, customer data platforms for the uninitiated, what are they? What are people using for?
Yeah, CDP, that customer data platform, we're trying to get to the holy grail of a persistent, unified, 360-degree view of the customer, the consumer, the guest, the shopper, ultimately people, right? So that marketers who are in a continual search for the holy grail of information that they can unlock those rich insights to drive growth. It's no wonder why we've seen the CDP market explode. But as we get into this conversation, there's no free lunch anywhere. And so some of the implications, particularly around data privacy and consent and permission, I think we're at the early innings of understanding those implications for the CDP.
It's the perfect time to bring Alysa into the conversation, because CDPs and their growth path could argue happened just a little before privacy was a thing. So you wonder if they've been architected to deal with it. Alysa, what are the things marketers and other stakeholders using CDPs need to think about from a privacy perspective?
So many good questions. One, I always talk about how do you break down the walls between legal, privacy, compliance, and marketing so that we're all rowing in the same direction. And I think just knowing what a CDP is and knowing those partnerships that your company has invested in and how they are supporting the business objectives is key. Knowing that factual background, you got to know what is happening in the CDPs. We're in an ecosystem where we're losing signal with the deprecation of third-party cookies. And so it's put so much more emphasis on knowing your customer, your first-party data, and making sure that as customers are interacting through multiple channels, through multiple sources, you really have a true understanding of who they are and their preferences so you can personalize and surprise and delight. That also means you are getting data from first party, from second party, from third party analytics. There's identity graphs happening in there. There's a whole lot of data. So number one, we know that we've got privacy obligations. We know that we usually have partners assisting us in that. So you're thinking about your partner relationship and how privacy law applies to that, because there's different ramifications if it's a service provider, if it's not. But those data combinations, when you're beyond first party data, that's where we have some of these privacy laws that say that actually, that triggers some permission. If somebody's opted out, let's say it's not sensitive data in the US, you've got to handle that. I think one of the other really big things that is the sleeper issue is you have these kind of major enterprises with multiple brands. They have multiple verticals. And the idea would be, I have the same customer as a purchaser in many of my brands. I want that true sense of who she is. Well, each of those companies is a different company, a different business under privacy law. And so you can't just share it widely because there's different privacy impacts along that. And so if you don't have that data provenance through that and really track that with your privacy obligations, you're going all in on the marketing side and just ignoring that there's any of these privacy trail longs that really do follow that deep insight into the consumer.
You've got this single view of the customer, multiple sources, as you said, coming in to build that view. It turns into a segmentation engine that you use to say, here's a subset of people that I want to target or want to understand better, whether using a CDP or now what they're calling composable CDPs, which are segmentation engines on top of cloud warehouses like Snowflake.
Right.
And then I noticed you said, and then you got to activate that. So you got to activate that data. You got to do something with it. So you're advertising to that person or you're sending it places. And I noticed kind of in that context, you use the word permission. And I was curious what you meant by that.
Well, I was intentional with that because number one, I often hear from marketers either on the one hand, it's not personal data at all. But on the other hand, I hear, oh, it's all consented data. And I peel that back a little bit and it's not GDPR consent. We don't see a lot of US marketers choosing to go with an opt-in consent if they don't think that they absolutely have to do that. And so it's an opt-out. And that's a setting, that's a choice that we have set up in the US, but it's still somebody's status of their choice because they can change their choice, right? They made a selection to opt out. Well, you have to track that with that consumer because you've got to persist their opted out status. I mean, if you think about it, on the one hand, you have this 360 view of them. You see them coming in via app, brick and mortar, and yet you're going to tell a regulator that you weren't able to persist, that they had global privacy control enabled when they browsed on your site and you didn't honor that status. That doesn't work anymore. You can have your cake with the icing and ice cream on the side, but it also comes with managing the permissions, and permissions, whether it's an opt-out, whether it's, let's say we're talking about health data or kids data that has a higher status of an opt-in, and knowing that within your data segmentation, what goes along with that. I think the other point that we didn't talk about is activating. Like, the whole purpose is often to do interest-based advertising, and just that triggers the kind of analysis that California and all of these other states wrote these laws to focus on, to prioritize, was giving choice around cross-context behavioral advertising, targeted advertising.
I think what's interesting here that is admittedly, I think, frustrated for many of us in the industry is this tension around the drive to know everything we can about a customer consumer. The genie's not going back in the bottle, whatever kind of meme we want to use. More than ever, we need cross-functional partners to have a common language and align on the strategy. It's probably the most critical thing that we need right now in the marketplace.
It's counterintuitive, right? To actually talk about and anticipate where some of the friction points are in the ecosystem. Nobody wants to raise, hey, there may be this compliance issue. You have your revenue goal. And you want to hit it. You don't want to say, oh, I actually think we may need to address this other issue. Everybody's in their own silos, depending on where you sit. And then we hear from some in those places, well, my customers aren't asking me for that, so it clearly isn't an issue. Why am I going to just raise this issue if they're not asking it? And so we're not all speaking the same language. And that, I think, slows things down. So everybody's kind of at a different point in their journey.
But what we do know, we have enough research that say people do want the choice. They want their data respected. They want to make the choice, and they want those choices respected. That is not up for debate, right? So with that as the foundational truth, then how are companies stepping up to deliver on what, again, their customers and consumers are asking for? That actually is not attention. It's more it's the how to do it, not why to do it.
Trust means money. It does. And I don't think everybody has bought on to that idea, but that is what we are seeing in the survey data and loyalty. And so those who figure that out, you start seeing it. It's in their brand. It's in the way that they are, their North Star, that they are setting their permissions and really addressing that. And there are others who are focusing on the 360 view and not taking that with obligations that come along with that. And I think we'll see consumer behavior tell a story based on those two different types of paths.